Hi everyone, Teresa Gregorio here from the Petite Project, and this week's post goes over general rules for modifications. If there are any, if any of those apply to you, and if you can take that information and move forward in figuring out how to select designs that you're actually interested in knitting and will be successful in knitting before you even start. So there's a few steps that I suggest within this week's post, and again we're trying to be really practical with picking a sweater design. So if you pick one that you have access to and sort of looking at the information it gives you, the information you know about yourself, and seeing if you can plug those two things together and determine how simple or complicated it will be to be able to move forward and create your own list of general modifications that you would sort of think about and look for in patterns. So one of the first things I suggest is essentially to do what we've been doing throughout the Knit Petite project so far this year and know your own shape, know your own measurements, and be really familiar with what that is. Another thing I suggest is being very clear with the things that you actually want to get out of the design that you create, so what your fit preferences are, and applying that information to looking at sizing charts. So I've been talking a lot about that over the past few weeks and months, and this week what I've actually done for you is gone through and picked two of the free and easily accessible sizing charts that a lot of knitwear designers use. Not all knitwear designers, but a lot of knitwear designers. One of them is the CYC standards, which are free and I've linked to, and I'll put a link below as well. And the other one is the recently updated and quite detailed measurements developed by Ysolda for knitwear designers. So she's really particular with certain measurements she has in there. So for example, CYC has I think 9 points of measurement, whereas Ysolda's has something like 23. So she's put a lot more into her chart. And if you look at the two, what I did in this week's post is I took my measurements, I looked at both of those charts, and I circled throughout the chart where I matched up with those measurements, and in some cases had to add in my own numbers because they just were not there. So what I think this exercise will do, if you complete it as well, is it will show you that hopefully you understand that not everyone, or there's pretty much no one who's going to fit perfectly in one column, right? You're not going to find a person who's perfect through all of those points there and they're going to fit that perfectly. You're going to probably be scattered across those charts. And something else that you can discover by looking at them is really how you're going to have to make some modifications to make something fit you in a way that you're probably real happy with. So for example, when you looked at mine, like I said, had to add in a few numbers there, particularly in lengths, because they just didn't exist. They were significantly shorter than the charts included. So CYC, the back waist length, was about 1 inch too long in any of the sizes, and no, sorry, 2 inches too long, and Ysolda's was only 1 inch too long. So hers is a little closer to my back waist length, which is a problem that a lot of petite people encounter. So doing that for yourself, I highly suggest it. It's easy, it's super quick. You just take that chart, you can print it out or you can even do it digitally, go through and circle your numbers after you've measured yourself and had a friend help you take certain measurements. And I think it's really illuminating to do that, because when you have that done, one of the next things that I suggest that you do is look at a few general guidelines that do exist out there for petite people, and most of them are from the sewing world, but you can sort of get a sense of what they're talking about and what you are and what they have, because in some cases they're going to give you information that might jive with the numbers you have. In some cases it won't. And for example, you may have a broader back than they presume that you have. You may be petite on the bottom, because remember earlier in the year we were talking about different ways that you can be petite. So you might be shorter than 5'4", but your back waist length might be a regular size, right? So the way that you're petite might be from the waist down. So if you're knitting a sweater, it may not be something that you have to modify as much or in the same way as somebody else like me who has a shorter back waist length. So this week's post, again, very practical, asking you to look at those charts, circle your own measurements. It's really quite illuminating. It's a very visual way of seeing how you may be scattered across a chart. I hope that nobody feels badly about not fitting into one column, because I don't think it's something that you're going to find in the human population. You're probably not going to find someone who fits perfectly in a column, because this is averaged numbers, right? And I hope that moving forward with the Knit Petite project, looking at the pattern you actually have, this is going to help you to get a sense of the things that you might have to think about before you jump in. So for example, when I went through and I circled my numbers on those charts, I could see pretty clearly that yes, indeed, certain vertical lengths like my back waist, the arm side depth, the width of my shoulder, and even Ysolda has this number, the shoulder drop, right? Because remember, I keep talking about how I have sloping shoulders. I know that I have about 2 inches difference between here and between here, which is going to make a little bit of a difference for certain things. So like if I'm doing a set-in sleeved sweater, the way that it's staggered moving upwards, I might want to consider changing that, because I have about 1 inch or ½ an inch difference in this measurement than some patterns may presume that I have. The reason I know that is because of the body graph, which I suggested that everybody do a couple weeks ago. So I hope you've thought about that and considered doing that for yourself with getting a hand from a friend to help trace the outline of your body. But anyway, that is one way that the body graph helped me. That is one way that knowing those numbers will help me moving forward. So that's what this week's post is about, laying the groundwork and doing some practical things for actually looking at what the charts say and what your body tells you, and putting that towards actually thinking about patterns that you want to knit for yourself. So next week we're going to start looking at math. I know, math, but that is applying the information that we know in a real life example. So again, I'm going to look at the pattern that I've been looking at as an example so far. It's a pretty complex one, right? Because it's got color work, it's got a pretty big gauge, it's bottom up, it's in the round, right? So I think it's going to be a really good way of walking us through thinking about the sorts of things that you're going to have to consider math-wise, because nothing is impossible to be changed, but certain things are going to be more work than other things are going to be. So it just depends. You have to find the road that you're comfortable with, the road that is going to be worth it for you. So the question for this week is, I've listed 2 different lists, different charts that include general modifications that a petite person might want to make. I'm asking for this week, do you know of any others? So the one that I listed was from the Petite Pizzazz article from Vogue Knitting 92-93 from Anne-Marie Soto. And the other one is from a website you can find easily accessible online, Madeline, and she is a lingerie sewing pattern designer, a personal stylist, photographer, and she's gone through and listed, it's kind of a nicely detailed chart for both top and bottoms, and she's from the sewing world, right? So again, this is sewing considerations, but again, it's going to give you a bit of a sense of the different lengths, mostly, and in some cases circumferences, that you would consider if you're going to petite something. So if you know of any other sources, any other charts like that that give you a general guideline, I would love to hear about that. Please share it. The best place to share it would be in the Knit Petite Project Ravelry group, which is a great central location for you to share stuff, but also chat with other people, get advice, ask questions, share advice, hopefully. Thanks for tuning in to the Knit Petite Project for this week and all the rest of the weeks of 2017. And as always, you can find me across all the social media and pretty much everywhere as Canary Knits. The home base for the Knit Petite Project is canaryknits.com/Knit Petite Project. Thank you for sharing and collaborating and listening and joining along so far this year and into the future weeks and months of this year. And thanks again. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.